Hi, and welcome to this sample demo of Password Safe. In terms of agenda, this session is intended to show the key points of a technical demo of Password Safe to help sales engineers prepare for presenting customer demonstrations. We'll start with a brief introduction of Password Safe's key capabilities and differentiators, then look at a structure for a demo to effectively show those capabilities. The basic assumption for this technical demo is that there will have been a previous meeting with a customer led by an account manager, and that this will be a second session presented by a sales engineer looking at more detail about the solution and its capabilities. Although the focus should be to demonstrate the product, before starting the demo, it's worth using some slides out of the Password Safe deck to recap and set the scene. This first slide shows Universal Privilege Management, which is BeyondTrust's market-leading solution that allows customers secure privilege and access in their environment. Today, we're focusing on Password Safe, which is going to allow the organization to discover, manage, audit, and monitor privileged accounts and sessions of all types in their organization. It's hosted on BeyondTrust, and we'll briefly look at the deployment options in a minute. The next slide talks about the specific benefits of using Password Safe. There is an overlap between Password Safe and the Vault component of Secure Remote Access as regards credential management. Both are capable of securely storing passwords and SSH keys. However, Password Safe has got a greater depth and breadth of functionality around managing those credentials. For example, being able to rotate passwords on a much broader set of systems, including not only directories, but also credentials on Windows and Linux Unix endpoints and other targets such as databases and cloud platforms. End users can establish sessions using credentials stored in Password Safe, and we're able to specify which credentials and systems they can access, and then both monitor the sessions live and record them for later review. The advanced threat analytics allows customers to improve their security posture by correlating behavior against a baseline and then detecting anomalous user behavior. There's also extensive functionality to meet the reporting needs of most common auditing compliance standards. Key Password Safe capabilities allow organizations to quickly and effectively start managing credentials and sessions in their environment. Automated discovery allows them to quickly scan, identify and profile all assets, finding out information such as local users and installed software on those machines. Smart rules then use that information to sort assets and accounts into logical groups, and that helps to automate operations such as onboarding. The resulting smart groups are regularly updated and the basis for access control, and this adapts according to changes in the environment and combines with flexible workflow rules to build a robust and dynamic access policy. Password Safe APIs can be used to implement application-to-application password management, eliminating hard-coded or embedded application credentials, and also to enable the integration with tools and systems to orchestrate enterprise-wide PAM. To the last point, I prefer to detail the flexible deployment options in a fourth separate slide. As well as the reduced time to onboard and manage accounts, Password Safe and the underlying server platform BeyondTrust are available as a fully hardened physical or virtual appliance containing the operating system, application and database, meaning the installation time can be measured in hours instead of days or weeks. The virtual appliance is available either for on-premises hosting on Hyper-V or ESX, or in the cloud from marketplaces for Amazon Web Services, Azure and Google Cloud Platform. In terms of the effort and resources needed post-implementation, automated onboarding, mentioned before, also means that fewer resources are needed to manage the solution day to day, and that's also true of maintenance, as the appliance can receive packaged updates for the operating system, database and application, and these updates can be simply installed using the single interface for configuring and managing the appliance. Password Safe is now also available as a subscription-based SaaS offering, Password Safe Cloud, and this features the same functionality and mature platform as the other deployment options, while offering customers all the existing benefits of Password Safe, however on infrastructure completely managed by BeyondTrust. It can be licensed either by asset or use account, and that's also the case for the on-premises options, which are available under perpetual or subscription-based models. And that's it for the PowerPoint introduction. However, I keep 3 slides with more technical details in reserve in case they're needed to help answer customer questions. This first one lists out commonly used third-party solutions that BeyondTrust products can integrate with. SME customers are commonly asking about integrations with service management tools such as ServiceNow or Cherwell, along with MFA including Duo or Identity Access Management including Okta or Azure AD, while larger and more technically mature customers will be focused on topics such as CM, RPA or robotic process automation or identity governance. And we have other sessions in this series which will go into those integrations in more detail. The second slide shows the architecture of the UVM appliance, both the components under the hood and how they talk to external systems. This is particularly useful to show how password-safe uses protocols native to the target system for credential management and session management, as well as to explain how sessions are proxied through the appliance to enable monitoring and recording of those sessions. The third slide shows the architecture of password-safe cloud, which, under the hood, is largely similar to the on-premises architecture. However, with resource brokers in the cloud and on-premises that are used to manage credentials on managed assets and host sessions from users to those assets. We try to keep the initial demo simple, showing high-level functionality and leaving technical detail for a later, more in-depth technical session if required. Rather than running through a great wedge of slides and spending a lot of time discussing technical minutiae, an effective initial demo shows the key features of Password Safe and brings to life to the customer how the solution is going to meet their requirements and enable their users to work securely and productively. So let's now talk about how to structure the demo to do just that. An initial technical demo will typically be scheduled for between 30 and 60 minutes, which is not enough time to go into a great deal of technical detail, so again, keep it high level, highlighting technical capabilities and getting the customer excited about the possibilities of the product and how it's going to fit into their existing environment and working practices. To that end, I usually structure a password-safe demo around people, and specifically 3 roles within the customer's organization. First, I'll lead with the end user experience, describing a typical end user's requirements and how those users will access endpoints and credentials both via the Password Safe UI and existing direct connection methods. Secondly, we're going to look at the auditor role and how those people can monitor live sessions, review past sessions, and access reporting on the user activity. Finally, we'll talk about the product from the administrator's perspective, the ease of implementing Password Safe, and how the high degree of automation makes administration tasks a breeze, for example managing the platform and ongoing asset and account onboarding. I've now switched over to my demo environment. In this case, I'm running locally on my laptop and I've got several virtual machines set up. I've got the UVM, I've got a couple of target systems, Windows and Linux Unix, and also a couple of other servers such as a domain controller and clients. In terms of the users that I've got configured for the use cases, first up is Martha Davis. This is an example of a typical password safe end user. So the user has got access to various credentials inside the environment, so privileged accounts that they need to accomplish their job and connect to various different systems. In terms of authenticating, I authenticate using AD. You can see that I'm logging on with an AD credential in btlab.btu.cloud. Because of the sensitivity of the contents of Password Safe, of course I want to make sure that there's 2FA in place, so I can see that in this case the user's authenticating as M. Davis. Also, I need to approve that Duo request. Switching back into my lab, I can see here now that the user's authenticated successfully. Inside Beyond Insight, they have access to 2 sets of credentials. We'll see team passwords in a little bit of detail later. This is a new feature inside Password Safe since version 7. It allows me to have a set of shared credentials for a given team. These are typically unmanaged, so it's like a jotting pad, if you will. However, of more interest is these credentials stored inside Password Safe. These are typically actively managed, and I can see a couple of high-level categorizations of these accounts. So first of all, under Systems, I can see a list of the different local accounts the user has access to. These are both on Windows and Linux systems, and I can also see that it's a mix of typical shared admin accounts, but also I can see that, interestingly, there is a possibility to also give the user access to their dedicated or named accounts and link them to the specific user so that only they have access to those credentials. Aside from local credentials on different operating systems, we can also have credentials within databases. So in this case, I just have a SQL Server database set up, and I can see that this user has access to this credential BTU_DBO. Aside from local accounts, we also have domain linked accounts. In this case, you can see straight away that it looks a little different in that the account appears several different times. However, if I look at the system column, you can see that these accounts are linked to particular systems. This is out of the box functionality that allows us to limit the scope of AD credentials so that users are only able to connect to the systems that they're authorized to connect to. And that's without the need of any group policy on the actual endpoints. This is purely within password safe. Finally, aside from local credentials, we also have the possibility to actively manage cloud credentials. So in this case, you can see that I've got examples of Office 365 credentials that the user has access to. Also an example of a corporate social media account that we need to protect. Having seen the different types of accounts that can be managed using password safe, let's now have a look at how users are going to consume those credentials. First of all, let's look at how they can establish connections via password safe. So in this case, this is a trusted user who is allowed to establish connections using a one-click launch. By clicking on this button, for example, under Systems, we can establish a session directly to the Windows system WS10 using the privileged account local_admin. By clicking on Open RDP session, that's then going to initiate a connection via password safe to the endpoint. Because this is going via password safe, the session is being recorded and can also be monitored live. So this session is being established. I can see it's established using the privileged credential from inside password safe. That's transparent to the user, and the user hasn't seen the password in question. Aside from RDP connections, we can also establish native SSH sessions. In this case, I'm connecting to a Linux machine. Again, I have a one-click launch because the user doesn't need approval. In this case, they have a button here to open an SSH session. When they click on that Open SSH session button, what's now happening is that a session is being launched locally on their machine, in this case using PuTTY. And this is now connecting again via the BI server, is passing across this session identifier, and that session identifier is identifying to password safe which privileged credential is going to be used and which target system that we're going to connect to. Aside from OS connections, we also have the possibility to establish connections using thick clients. The example that I use is that of a database. So in this case, when I'm connected to Microsoft SQL Server, of course I don't want to have an RDP or an SSH session. I want to launch the thick client for the application. In this case, when I click on Application Session, again the connection is going via the BI server, but there's also an additional hop to an application server where the thick client in question, namely SQL Server Management Studio, is being launched. When the application is launched, password safe is of course injecting the credential. In this case for BTU_DBO, it's injecting the username and the password for this privileged credential. The last example that I want to demonstrate for the connection methods is a browser-based application. So if we consider corporate social media accounts that need to be secured, we can now click on the one-click launch, click on Application Session, and in this case, The session is now again being established via the BI server and the application server. A browser is being launched, the credential for Twitter is being injected, and thus the risk of exposing the password for a high-risk corporate account is avoided, and we've just given the user a recorded session that can also be monitored live. Up until now, all of the connections that we've seen have been established via the password safe UI. This is a great user-friendly web interface for users who need to connect to target systems fairly infrequently. However, in most organizations, there's going to be a large number of users who regularly connect to target systems as part of their job function. And getting those users to log into the password safe UI each time they want to connect may be a bit of an inconvenience for them. So let's look at another mechanism that's going to allow them to establish the connection to an endpoint using the native tools in their current workflow. So let's start with the example of a Windows administrator. If I click on the Systems tab, I can see the local admin credential on WS10 that this user's already made a favourite of. Aside from the one-click launch, there's also the possibility to download an RDP Direct Connect file. When I click on this, note that the file that's downloaded is slightly different from the others. If I look at this file, you notice that the actual file name gives the game away a little, but if I actually look at the contents of that file, I can see first of all that the connection is still going via the BI server, and the username that's being passed is made up of the user's AD credential, the privileged account that I want to retrieve from password safe, and the target system that I want to connect to using that privileged account. So that's what's in the file. Let's now see what happens when I double click on the file. When I connect to BI, I still need to authenticate using the same mechanism as if I was connecting to password safe. So I need to put in my AD credential, and when I'm doing this connection, note that because I've got 2FA switched on for this account, I need to approve to authenticate. Now that that's done, I can see that the session is now being established to the target system. Also note that if approval is needed from an authorizer, this is still the case for this direct connection. Now that we see that the user is connected to the endpoint successfully without needing to connect to password safe, the RDP connection can be saved in a folder or whatever remote desktop connection management tool the user needs. We also have the same possibility for Unix users. In this case, I'm using PuTTY. However, this works for any SSH client, including the native client in Unix/Linux. As with RDP connections, note that this connection string that I'm loading contains the AD user, the privileged account that I want to retrieve from password safe, the target system that I'm connecting to, and finally the BI server that I'm connecting via. Also note that it's using a custom port of 4422. When I click on Open, at this stage note that I need to enter my password, and as 2FA is required, I need to approve that as well. That now completes the connection, and it's already established the session through to the BI server. This is now establishing the onward connection from the BI server to the endpoint in question, namely LX01, using the privileged account mdavis_u admin that was retrieved from password safe. In this demo, Martha's SSH or RDP sessions in password safe so far have been auto-approved. That's because she's a trusted user and the sessions are being recorded. However, that's not the case if she wants to retrieve the password and then manually connect to a target. She has permissions to retrieve the password for this account, for example. However, authorization from a designated approver is needed to do so. So she's going to enter an appropriate reason. Then note that we have the possibility also to attach a ticket number to this. And in fact, what we can also do is specify that the validation that takes place for this ticket, well, this is going to check, for example, that the user has got the ticket assigned to them. It's going to check the ticket is open, and this can also replace a formal approval process. However, in this case, note that when I submit the request, even though I attached a valid ticket number, the request is showing as pending. If I click on the request, I can see that approval is required, and I can see who it's required from. So it's going to be, in this case, let's say the team lead for Martha's team, namely Hayden Lee. So Hayden will receive an email and then log in. And once he's logged in, can see all of the pending tickets. In this case, the one for Martha. You can check the details on there, and then approve or deny the request. In this case, let's say that that's approved. And now when I switch back to Martha's session, I can see that the request no longer appears under pending, but is now showing as active. She's now able to retrieve the password and could now establish the connection to that target system manually using the provided credential. An access policy needs to take into account the sensitivity of a target system, the risk of a given access method, and ultimately how trusted the user is. The approval process can be put in place for less trusted users, or RDP and SSH connections to critical assets, systems, or accounts to mitigate the risk of those accesses. In this case, now that Martha's finished with the request, she can now check the credential back in, and that's going to make it available for other users in the system. The last use case in this demo is going to be that of team passwords. This new functionality in Password Safe allows a team to build and maintain a pool of unmanaged credentials. So I click on Team Passwords, and as Martha is a member of the PBPS requesters group, we can see that she has access to a couple of credentials for test and dev environments. Note that she can't establish sessions using these credentials. She can review the password and will then establish the connection to these systems manually. This functionality is very useful for ad hoc storage of non-critical and non-sensitive credentials that don't require active management. And that concludes the end user experience demo. The next part focuses on the functions available to an auditor. Role-based access control allows full segregation of duties within Password Safe, meaning that when I log in as an auditor and then click on the hamburger, I can't see credentials, however I can see analytics and reporting. And if I click on Password Safe, I can see a list of sessions that the user can review. Let's start off by reviewing an active session. If I click on Martha's session to LX01, I can see that the auditor has a view of, or a live view of the user session, such that if I type any commands in, you can see that that's immediately being replicated across to the auditor's view. Password Safe has connection profiles, and these can be used to build lists of forbidden commands. So, if for example, I try to shut the server down, you see that the session is now blocked and unlocked. We can also trigger alerts off this, so send out emails of this suspicious behaviour, and switching back to the auditor's view, check the session, and then make a decision on whether we'll unlock it or not. In this case, I might want to contact the user, explain why it's forbidden, and then allow them to keep working by unlocking the session. For activity that's definitely malicious, the other alternative is to terminate the session. I can also choose to cancel the user's approved request as well. With that session closed, let's now look at replaying previous sessions. Under Replay, We can see a comprehensive list of sessions. How would we find relevant session? Well, we can set filters on the individual columns to display only sessions for particular systems, particular accounts, particular users, and also particular date time ranges as well. The other option is in the top right-hand corner. I can search for a particular system, particular account, etc. And also clicking on this checkbox, then search by keystroke. So say I'm looking for a particular operation or a particular session on a server. I look for the operation and it shows me a list of those sessions containing command. We've already seen sessions when looking at live sessions. Let's have a look at an RDP session in this instance. So I choose the actual session, click on open, and as you can see that currently shows only those commands that match the filter. If I remove that, I can then see all of the operations in this particular recording. I can click on play, and then click on the next action to navigate through the session, and can also click on a particular operation to go straight to that particular moment in the recording. I can also add, for those organisations that need to review a particular number of sessions, I can set that information in here, saying that I have reviewed the session and not seen any malicious behaviour. I can mark the session as reviewed and then save and close. There's also functionality to archive all the appliance to free up disk space. However, the metadata is going to remain in the database, and if required, a session can then be restored from storage for review with a simple click of a button. Under Analytics and Reporting, we have a comprehensive set of predefined reports and the possibility to also create custom reports if required. It's worth becoming familiar with the pre-configured reports so that you can respond to customers' use case during your demo. Also note that it's the best check functionality as browse these pages just before a demo, as they take some time to render cold on under-resourced virtual machines. In a base demo, I'll usually go with cover reports. It's best to save them as views to speed up the demo a little. First of all, the managed account password age report is a great example showing the health of the managed account state. We can see that almost all of the automatically managed accounts are in policy, probably because I rotated all of them this morning. And looking at the second page, I can see that there are some accounts that are out of policy. There's a mixture of accounts that are going to need to be manually rotated to bring them to policy. And there's also a couple of others, in this case on one single endpoint that no longer exists in my environment, so I can take these accounts out of password safe. And there's also a group of accounts on Microsoft 365, which is making me think that I need to fix an issue with a functional account. The second example shows the activity report, and with this I'm going to be able to build a picture of what an individual user or account has done in a particular time frame. I choose the report, select the smart group, the date range, and then view the report. This now shows me all of the users' recorded activity. Typically I'd restrict it to a particular endpoint or to a date range, and we can also use the same report to find all activity related to a particular endpoint by clearing out the username, putting in the endpoint name, and reloading the report. Note that the auditor is able to see all activity. In this case, I can see activity not only for normal users, but I can also see activity for the administrator within Password Safe. The auditor role has view of all activity on a given asset or a given group of assets, regardless of who carried out that activity. When considering what to present in a demo, think about who will be in the audience and who the customer is. The end user and auditor demos will help less technical users, who might also be net new to PAM, understand how password safe will easily and securely allow them to gain control of privileged accounts and access in their environment. A more informed audience may already be using a competitor's product, and for them, password safe's key differentiators around ease of use are really brought to the fore in the administrator use cases. We've already covered the availability as an appliance, so the next section will focus on the other key points detailed in the introduction: discovery and scanning assets, automatically onboarding assets and accounts using smart rules, then using smart groups as the foundation for access control. Logging in as an administrator grants access to more functionality than when logging in as an end user. There's no separate thick client for administration, and customers can also control which parts of the administration UI particular individuals or teams will be able to access for their role. Walking through a typical deployment, we've already described how the availability as an appliance makes installing and configuring the product easy. That's also true of the next steps, starting with discovery. In technologically mature organizations, there may be an existing information source such as a configuration management database that contains details of assets and accounts. However, it may not be correct or up to date and might be entirely missing from other environments. So how can we discover the assets and accounts that need to be onboarded and brought under management? Clicking on Scheduled Discovery Scan, we first see the different types. In this case, we'll use a detailed discovery which runs on a system to pull back information including services, scheduled tasks, and most critically, the local users on that asset. The next screen allows me to specify which machines will be scanned. This can be an existing group of machines pulled from AD, for example, or also a single machine, a subnet, or in this case, an IP range of 172.16.0.200 to 172.16.0.254. On the next screen, we can then choose which credential is going to be used for the scan. I'm going to select a Windows credential and put in a key of 1234. Validate and hit next. The next screen, we choose the scan agent. And on the final screen, we can now choose the name for the job and most critically, also set the scheduling for this. It could be a one-time scan or an immediate scan, which is very useful at the beginning of a deployment. However, more usefully, we can also set up a recurring scan, meaning that a discovery is now an ongoing, active process, constantly updating password safe with newly added assets and information about those machines. On the final screen, we can see the active, completed and scheduled scans. However, as the scan can take several minutes, let's switch to the assets view. When a new resource is discovered, it's added as an asset, and this icon shows that that particular asset has already been scanned. There's high-level detail on the first page, showing me top-level information about the asset, but obviously much more detail in the scan data, showing me information about the installed software, services that are running on this machine, and most critically, the local users that were discovered on this machine. In this case, I can see that there is at least one administrator level account that I'm going to want to take management of with password safe. This process of onboarding assets and accounts can be automated using smart rules, an easily configured and powerful filter that can also contain pre-configured actions. In this first rule, we see the simple criteria that are using operating system information discovered in the scan to categorize the assets. Then the actions of the smart rule are going to onboard them for management, setting how password safe will rotate local credentials on those machines, and finally show them as a logical grouping called a smart group. Aside from using data from scans for categorizing assets, smart rules can also use information from Active Directory. In this smart rule, a directory query pulls a list of assets from AD, and then we're going to use the actions to onboard those systems for management and finally show them as a smart group. Asset-based smart groups appear as views that we can then select in the Assets tab, And these are regularly updated, meaning that any newly added assets are going to appear automatically and become managed as the smart rule updates. The resulting smart group can also be set as a target for a scan. And setting up a recurring scan is now a really easy way of automatically not only onboarding new assets, but also discovering local accounts on them. That's going to include not only legitimate accounts, but also any backdoor accounts that may have been created on those systems. Once the accounts have been discovered, we can configure account-based smart rules to onboard them automatically. In the scan data, we found at least one privileged local account that we wanted to onboard, and in this first example of an account-based smart rule, the criteria are any account that's discovered with a privilege level of administrator on the WS Workstation's asset smart group, and the actions are to show the accounts as a smart group and bring the accounts under management. As with assets, smart rules can also onboard accounts directly from Active Directory. This example is going to use a simple directory query to pull all accounts ending with ADM and then show them as a smart group and enable management for them. A big risk with AD credentials is that they can potentially be used across the enterprise estate if not suitably restricted. However, this action links the AD accounts to a particular group of assets, meaning that the user can only connect to these assets with these accounts, effectively setting a scope for an AD credential. Also note that these accounts are dedicated or named accounts, which with other PAM vendors can be exceptionally difficult to manage. However, with this one simple smart rule, what we can do is then link these dedicated or named privileged accounts to a group of restricted rights users. Switching over to the Managed Accounts tab and selecting the correct smart group, we can demonstrate that a given user will have their named privileged account directly mapped to themselves exclusively. When an account is onboarded, the password is immediately changed, meaning that these users who previously knew the account's password now need to use password safe to access resources using these accounts. We now have far better auditing and visibility of what these named accounts are being used for. Passwords are also changed each time any account is used and checked back in, and will also be automatically rotated to stay in compliance with the company password policy. Once the assets and accounts are managed, the next step is setting who can use which accounts in password safe. Under User Management, we see the access roles and the different users to whom these roles are assigned. The requesters have no explicit permissions for any password-safe features other than team passwords. However, smart groups are used as the foundation of the access model. Using these logical groups of accounts, we can very simply determine which accounts users will have access to. In the end-user demo, Martha, who is a member of the PBPS requesters group, has access to this group of shared local accounts. She also has access to the help desk shared AD accounts, however can only use them to connect to endpoints in the WS Workstation's smart group. This demo showed the high-level concepts within Password Safe and how the solution is not only simple to install because of the appliance model, but also much quicker to deploy into production due to the ease with which discovery and onboarding can be automated. These efficiency gains also continue post-deployment when the automation continues to massively reduce the amount of effort required to bring systems and accounts under management as they're added to the environment. To finish the administration piece, customers sometimes ask how the appliance is managed. Unfortunately, due to BeyondTrust's license agreement with Microsoft, we're unable to provide NFR licenses for partners to use in a demo, so this deck includes some screenshots of the user interface. By default, the appliance is locked down, meaning that the console access is disabled for increased security. However, most of the functionality for managing the system is exposed in the appliance management user interface. The UVM has all roles installed on it, and the roles editor can be used to set which roles are active on a particular server. For a very simple implementation, we might have two servers configured in an active-passive pair with all roles running, while in a larger environment, we might have multiple servers in effect configured as worker nodes with only a limited number of roles running on each. The diagnostics page shows a dashboard of the main metrics and gives an easy visibility of the overall health of the system and warns of potential issues. Finally, the maintenance page shows a list of the available updates for not only the application, but also the operating system and SQL Server if installed. These can be configured to update automatically from BeyondTrust Updater. However, we also have the possibility to stage them using the Enterprise Update Server or install them manually. This session is intended to serve as a guide for presenting a technical demo, showing use cases that you might not always use, but giving you a set of examples that you can fall back on in your presentations to customers. If you need more in-depth training on the product, please check out the BeyondTrust Certified Implementation Engineer track in BeyondTrust University. This contains much more detail on all of the topics covered in this session. This series also includes presentations on more advanced topics, including common integrations for password safe with both third-party products and other BeyondTrust products. It can be found on the partner portal along with other information including competitive differentiators. Password safe documentation and complete docs on our other products can be found at beyondtrust.com/docs. We hope you enjoyed this session and found it useful. Thank you for your attention and goodbye.